Welcome back to the Be Her Village podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin McGrayus. I'm a doula and the founder of Be Her Village. Be Her Village is an incredible new baby registry platform that helps you get the care you need when you're having your baby. You can add doulas, home birth midwives, postpartum care, meals, pelvic floor support, and all the other types of services and care that you need as you're welcoming your baby. Today, I'm sharing with you part two of my conversation with certified nurse midwife and home birth midwife, Michele Liot. In our first part, we talked all about the biggest question on people's minds about home birth. Is it safe? And Michele, that conversation was so in depth and so incredible. If you have not listened to it, go back and make sure you listen to part one. In part two, we talk about the cost of home birth. This is a burning question for a lot of people, and we get into it in the raw and real way that Michele does, talking about actual dollars, what our options are, why home birth costs what it costs, and how we can get that care covered. And let me tell you, this is an episode, if you are thinking about home birth, that you absolutely must listen to. We also talk about the logistics of giving birth at home. What kind of space do you need? How messy does it get? Which is a question partners and husbands and dads often ask. Like, what are we going to do in this house at this home birth? What is there going to be blood everywhere? So we talk about that. And if you're somebody who's considering home birth, this is an amazing episode to listen to get the tips you need and to share this sort of information about what's going to happen with your partner and your family. So, without further ado, please listen to this wonderful part two of my conversation with Michele Liot.
Is it expensive to give birth at home? Is it covered by insurance? And you don't have to speak to every situation, but in your practice, what are you seeing? And what should people be planning for as far as home birth costs? Not necessarily just your fee as a midwife, but like your assistant, who's paying your assistant, who's paying for those supplies, those many supplies you have, who's paying for prenatal visits, what do I need to buy as a home birthing person? Like, what can you run down what the fees look like for somebody who's like, oh, actually, all this sounds great, and I just convinced my husband and mother and all the people, like, I'm all in for home birth. How do I actually financially execute my home birth?
This is a huge question for everybody. It's on my list of questions to clients. I have my own little questionnaire for when people call me. Okay, so let's just talk brass tacks. Some people's models are slightly different, so I'm not going to speak to every midwife in their practice, but I know that the sort of predominant my method is very similar, even if my pricing may be slightly different because I don't know everybody's price point. But I know that the model is shared among the home birth midwives on Long Island, and similarly to the majority in the state. I'm connecting more and more with other out of hospital midwives in the state, and it's kind of general across the board. So there's a retainer fee, okay, and that's different for everyone. My retainer is $2,000. People are like, oh my God, $2,000. And I'm like, I just got paid 2 days ago for a birth in January. It's October. So I have held space. It is October.
So 9 months later, 10 months later.
9 months after I've been taking care of someone for 9 months.
Oh, geez.
And so labored them and delivered them. Well, they delivered themselves, but I was present for their birth, right?
Right.
And their postpartum care and the ongoing follow-up. Any paperwork need to be cleared, any FMLA here and there, all the home visits that I'm providing, all of the birth supplies, my assistant fee, paying my biller.
Wow.
So that's almost 2 years from the start of care when you think about it.
Right. And I mean, factor inflation in there.
So people are like, why can't you apply my retainer to my insurance? And I'm like, I have to feed my family.
So
I have to pay my rent.
So break this down for me. No, this is really interesting. So people are paying a retainer, and that's literally to retain your care, to get on your schedule and that's another factor, right? It's like,
I will go on call for you, right? Yeah. I remain at your service. I am accessible to you. You get comprehensive prenatal care, right? If you have a negative blood type, you're getting your RhoGAM. I don't charge for that. I cover it. That is
So the
over $100.
$2,000 covers like becoming your client and actually reserving one of your limited spots because how you can only have a handful, 10 clients
I
a
do a
month. I don't even
very
know.
low volume of clientele.
Right. Just by the nature of being present for the birth, being on
I'm a
call,
solo provider. If
solo provider. It's hard. Yeah.
um,
Okay.
so right,
So
so my retainer fee is covering my biller. It's covering my birth assistant fee. Right there,
yes.
that is almost the majority of the retainer.
Wow.
Okay, supplies for the birth. And then all that goes into the nuance of, paying rent for an office, supplies and equipment, purchasing the medications, which are
We
expensive.
still haven't gotten to like an hourly salary for you. So that's just
Oh, that's so
overhead.
funny. They're so funny. You're so cute. Aw. You know, what's that? I always joke. I'm like, I'm a home birth midwife. I'm actually super rich and I do volunteer work. So, it's wealth providing. But no, I love what I do and it pans out. But so some people say, oh, that's really expensive. So my fee, my global fee, because
Yes.
I charge a global fee. I don't do like a la carte.
Right.
Right. So my global is $9,000. I'm sort of going to whisper that because a lot of midwives will not put their pricing out because insurance companies will go to those websites and then
Why?
make that be the benchmark for how they will reimburse.
Wow.
And then they
So
will
it's
undermine. So
so
you
it's
have
a it's a little bit of a game. This is and
a
fill me in
total
because
game.
this is my understanding of it is like the medical billing system, the insurance medical. It's like I'm going to bill you $300 for like the sick visit the pediatrician does. And the insurance is like, we'll pay 120. And so
Right.
you just like you have to
And
guess
you have
as a
your copay. So the
practitioner.
insurance is really only paying 100. You're paying the 20.
Right. But as a practitioner, you have to guess and just try, you're incentivized to continue inflating so that your insurance who keeps deflating and there's just this tug and so it's not even necessarily reflective of actual costs.
Not at all.
It's
So
an
let's bring it
insurance
back to
cost.
the official fee. So I
Okay.
get a retain. And my goal is always for the client to have the remainder of the cost of their birth, the $7,000, covered by their insurance. How do I get that done? Many midwives across this country, your problem. This is my fee. You pay out of pocket. I get my $9,000. You deal with your insurance. I don't do that because I want to help, but I am incurring fees for using my biller who recoups that on your
Right.
behalf. So my goal is always to have the remainder covered by health insurance. There's what's called gap exceptions, in or out of network exceptions. These are contracts made with your insurance companies because home birth midwives are most typically out of network with all providers. But little glitch in the New York State law, which is meaningful and supportive of home birth, is that they are obligated to honor the choice of someone to birth out of hospital. And if there are no in-network providers, they are required to provide benefits at the same rate if there's no one within 50 miles, right? Because a hospital,
Yeah.
I
This is
know.
the thing. I like want to make sure that people who might have just like zoned out because it sounded like a little
Right.
computery, like this is the part. Rewind, do the 15-second flip back, do 30 seconds flip back. Like listen to that because that is how you get your home birth covered by insurance, even if your insurance doesn't cover your home birth.
Correct. Because people are like, wait, but then I'm going to have to use my outer network benefits, my deductible, my this. Technically, if there's no in-network provider within 50 miles accessible to you, right? So just because there's someone in Connecticut that does home birth, obviously that doesn't count, right? So in New York State, there is this provision that you are required for an in for out of network exception. So you are getting in-network coverage, even though your provider is not in network because of the distance by which you can't access that care.
This is so
this
huge.
is the premise by which people are obtaining reimbursement for home birth services. My home birth, my biller is an exceptional home birth biller. She does New York State home birth reimbursement. She has a little worksheet that the client gets started, and then she works from there to develop the contract. And then she's the one that bills out for services after the client has given birth. And then we hopefully recoup that in some meaningful amount of time. This also goes for Medicaid, right? Because we talk about barriers to care. Medicaid in New York State does actually reimburse. They reimburse like at the like literally down to this like $6,999.97, right? Which I don't chase anybody for the 3 cents because that's rude.
It's like
But
almost on principle that they won't give you the 3 cents.
not all of it. But so, yes, the client is obligated for the retainer, but my hope and my wish and my goals are always that beyond the retainer, your out-of-pocket costs are very low. Yes, I have a home birth supply list. The most expensive item on that list is the Chucks pads, the wee wee pads. This goes into that mess conversation we were potentially going to hit.
Mhm.
These are the things that maintain the fluids, and we use them with abandon. Throw another Chucks down, throw another Chucks down.
You can
I
never have
cannot
enough Chucks.
integrate that cost because I don't have storage to store all the Chucks. So you have to get a box of Chucks. But otherwise on the home birth supply list is like postpartum items that you would need anyways. And if you want to have a birth tub, that's on you in my practice. There are other practices that rent birth tubs for another fee. But so that would add to your out of pocket cost as well, depending on if you desire water birth or not. But so that's essentially the cost. I don't charge you for my biller. That comes out of my global fee. I don't charge you for my assist. Some people do. I do. That comes out of my global fee. I do not charge you for medications. All labs get processed through insurance and sonograms as well. So you're not paying out of pocket for those, right? You're still eligible for all that coverage by your insurance company. And I think that's pretty straightforward. Does that feel like it answers the billing question?
That answers it so beautifully. And it's almost like such a relief that there is a way to get insurance to cover. And this is what I always told my doula clients, and you affirmed why. And I don't know that I always knew the full why behind it. But I would always tell people, and I'm going to tell everyone listening right now, do not call your insurance company to find out if home birth is covered. Call the home birth midwife that you want to use and ask her about how insurance coverage works within her practice. Because the
Absolutely.
insurance company is not incentivized to make home birth available to you. They're not going to tell you the tricks of the trade. They're not going to tell you, unless you get some really generous person on the customer service line, they're not going to tell you how you can get out of network exceptions and how they can pay for more of your care. They're going to tell you it's not covered.
That's where too, right? Communicating with your potential home birth provider, even if you're interviewing and communicating with others, there is like a pretty standardized, it's not necessarily like easy to find on Google, but your potential provider can typically, I always will hand it off to a client. It's a very explicit sheet with like Q&A for what to ask the person, what billing code for coverage, and then they kind of have to give you this information about
Wow.
what is officially covered versus what isn't. So, right, you trying to cold call your insurance, you're not going to get meaningful information. But if you're calling them with a prepared list of the appropriate questions to ask, where they're obligated to provide that answer, you are going to get good information. Another one is sort of the things that's nuanced to my practice. Other midwives, again, may do this, but I'm speaking to myself. I will say like, hey, I don't presume upon financial resources. If you need to communicate with my biller can take a look at your insurance card and based upon her experience and familiarity with your plan, can give you a rough idea of what you may expect for coverage. Is that a guarantee? No. Is she starting a contract with their insurance company? No, you have not retained me. So I am not, because every time my biller makes a phone call, I'm paying money for that. So I'm not investing yet if you haven't come into my care, but I am willing to try and help you get a sense of, so that you can then decide if moving forward feels possible. Right. So I will always do that little intro because again, I can't presume upon resources.
Right.
And unfortunately, home birth is still somewhat of a privileged undertaking.
It is.
Oh.
It is. And I just want to like do a quick plug for Be Her Village here because
plug it anyways.
okay,
I was about to do it. Can I plug it?
Please
Because
plug
then
away.
I'm gonna plug it.
Go ahead.
Because how can we gather money, right? So people do GoFundMe's, people do this thing, the other thing. People are getting money from people all the time to help with something. And people are like, oh, I can't ask for help with my birth. I'm like, well, you can ask for help with whatever you want, right? And so that's where Be Her Village comes into play because it makes it comfortable. It's a registry. You're putting down something you desire around a really important part of your life. People are familiar with registries already as a component of support for your wedding, for your baby arrival, right? And so if we can then put money towards your midwife's retainer, your doula services, maybe you have the retainer for the midwife, but to have a doula, which you know would be super beneficial, now feels out of reach because you've retained the midwife and you know you need that for your home birth, but you also want to have a doula. So how can you get that? Be Her Village right there. I mean, I just recommended it on the Long Island Home Birth Support website. I refuse to ever comment as a provider in there because I don't, that's a safe space for mothers seeking home birth support. I'm part of it because I'm a home birthing mom. I home birthed twice and I was actually born at home in the 80s. But the registry is part of how you can get financial support. And it's also a way, like, talk to your parents, talk to your family, if there's someone who's saying like, hey, what's the thing you want the most leading up to, right? Who are the people who are buying the $600 thing on your registry? Talk to them. Those are the ones you can be like, you know what? The thing I really want the most is I want to have my home birth and I need help with the retainer.
I love it. And I just want to say, from somebody, who sees the gifts that come through and the people who are registering, so many people are using Be Her Village to get home birth fees covered, to get birth center fees covered. For people will email us and say, can you release the funds right now? I have to see my midwife tomorrow. It's like, yes, yes, yes. All the money goes right to parents and helps them actually access the care that they need that makes all the difference. Okay. Thank you for the plug.
Oh, normalize very quickly too. I want, like, because people hear the word $2,000 and they can get really overwhelmed. But when you break it down to what you're receiving over 10 plus months of care, it's $200 a month.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that $200 a month is a small amount, but if you divide that up by weeks, right now we're talking $50 a week, right? And so you have to understand that it's also okay to save for your home birth. I did. Yes. My husband and I did. Right? We were young little things. I was a nurse. He was a landscaper. Like, we're not sitting in privilege. And we had to find the resources because we knew this was the deep desire of our hearts.
And it's worth it. And you're worth it. And your experience is worth it. And I think that's a big part of it too. I think that we get really caught up in like, we'll buy anything. If your baby needed something for $2,000, you'd buy it in an instant. You'd figure it out. You throw it on a credit card, like a care card or whatever. There's no interest.
$50 a week is 2 co-pays to go see your OB.
Right.
Right. So like, we need to break this down and understand that every time, because the obstetrical model too, depending on what your deductible and all those things, you may also be paying $2,000 for your birth. You may get billed by your hospital for $2,000 or more. I know people who have had to spend $10,000 for their births.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's
I don't know why I needed to pay, but I paid like $2,000 out of pocket, $2,000 or $3,000 out of pocket for my first birth. I don't know why. And then I didn't need to for my second birth. They were both in the hospital. I don't know. I might have gotten
somehow
scammed,
that is normalized that like that's what it cost. And I'm like, okay, but so then why are we uncomfortable with the idea of a retainer?
The fun thing for me though, was that came 3 months after my baby. So I got slammed with an unexpected bill. Awful. So not for nothing, but there's something like beautiful, but there's a contract. There's just like transparency around those costs. And that means a lot. Yeah.
And people working in the background to ensure coverage, taking that off of your plate. You're not battling the insurance company.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Having a biller on staff is amazing. Okay, I want to get to our last 2 things, which I think we can like lump into one larger conversation. I want to talk about, number 1, people feeling nervous about their space. So like, do you need a home to have a home birth? I guess, do you need a house? Do you need to own your house? Do you need a certain size house? Like I've worked with doula clients who are like, I don't think I can have a home birth. And I'm like, dude, if you have seen the little cottages out in the Hamptons that I have, the like the one room, I remember my not my first, but one of the earlier home births, like the midwife caught the baby in front of the fridge, but like we were kind of in the living room too. It was just this tiny space. So can we speak to that? Just like how much space you actually need for laboring, but for recovery also. Can you do it if you're a renter? Can you do it if you live with your in-laws and they're not on board? I don't know. Like, just what is the requirement for having a home birth? What are the home requirements? And a sort of secondary question to that is it messy? And I kind of laugh at this question, but it also is the first question when I was like freshly postpartum in my bed for my home birth. And we hadn't told most of my family because I like just didn't want to invite them into my home birthing space. I didn't want an eye roll. I didn't want judgment. And so we like FaceTimed with my brother and his wife, who were very supportive and it was fine, but it was their first time finding out we did it at home. And the very first question was not, is it safe? How much did it cost? How is your midwife trained? It was my brother saying to my husband, dude, was it messy? Just like for the partners slash dads out there who are like, cool, blood and guts and whatever birth juices, like all over my house.
Right,
Ew,
and
I don't
my
want it.
partner's in bed with the baby, and I am
Ew.
now stuck with a murder scene.
Exactly. Like
So
literally,
it's
I
like
think that's
it's such a common question. They're like,
yes.
"Whoa, like
Yeah, like
what am I gonna have
ew.
to do?" Because I might be also tired, and I'm like, "You probably will be tired if you've been supporting your laboring partner." But so yes, it. I love the question so much. So the mess, no, it's really not that messy. This is where the Chucks pads come into play. But Caitlin, you're gonna have to bring me back because my perimenopausal brain. The first part of the
The first
question
part of the
was,
question is like, what are the requirements, space and like owning
oh,
wise? Do you need a
back
home?
online, back
Yeah,
online.
love it. Thank
No,
you.
it's a zap.
Sorry, I threw a two-parter at you that wasn't fair, but I just like I feel like they're a little related. Like home
We
space,
are.
how much do you need?
Yeah.
And is it going to get bloody?
Okay. So home space is funny. I can tell you personally that I have delivered in about 18 inches of space. I have been present in studio apartments. I have seen people labor in yurts in the backyard. I have been in very large homes. I have in all the settings, right? Like you and I always
18
joke that
inches.
we just follow around with my Jade. Oh, that was hilarious. So the client had a relatively small bedroom related to the size of their bed. And that's fine. So there wasn't a lot of space between at the end of the bed or on either side. There was on each side probably about 18 inches or so, depending on like where the dressers were, where the et cetera. And so where this client dropped to their knees was in between the bed, but the bed didn't have opening underneath it. It had those those drawers. So I'm literally like, it's probably the width of my shoulders. My
Oh my
assistant is
goodness.
laughing. My assistant, so I'm on my hands and knees, real down low, right? And the client is on her hands and knees, so I'm behind her, and she's doing that great, like where they put the knees in now. This is like that new thing, and I'm
Oh
totally here.
yeah.
I think it's great. So she had a little more space, and then my assistant Noelle is recording in the background because the client wants the birth recorded, and Noelle is often really kind and will step in and do that. And so this baby's coming, and I have no room to move.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, what do you really need?
You need hands.
Hands.
That's it.
And she was helping catch because she wanted to. And that was great. And we had the baby, and it was so funny though, because so we slide the baby through her legs, right? And then like my foot slips on the Chuck's pad because there was like, fluids and juices and all those things. And so I'm laughing. I'm like, I think we need to get out of this like slightly enclosed little space now so we can like get you settled and recovered.
Right.
Like, whoa. And I'm like, don't slip on that. Like, don't, let me wipe your foot before you move. But like I said, right, any of the spaces are fine. And as far as like legal logistics, no, you don't need to own your home. Yes, you can be a rental. I've seen it on the blogs. There are people who birth in Airstreams, right? Like it really doesn't matter. It's just a place to catch your kid. I've seen births outside on the deck. I've seen, you can do whatever you want. I always joke, I'm like, you can birth standing on your head. Like you can do whatever you want, right? Like
I
I'll
love
just
it.
follow you around. I need this, you
Yep.
know. If I think I need more space, I may invite you to go into a slightly more expanded space in the setting that you're in. But I don't need it to be a huge space. It doesn't have to be in a bedroom. It doesn't have to be in
Mhm.
a bed. It can be anywhere you want your baby to get born in the space that you're in. But in the exact moment, what do I need? It's no big
Not
deal.
much. Yeah.
Not much. I
And
really don't need much.
And I'm just going to speak really quickly to my experience in as far as parents or in-laws or family living with you. At the very beginning of my third baby's pregnancy, which was my home birth baby, my father unexpectedly moved in with me because of a health issue. And I I think he was probably going to be asked to leave either way because I was planning on being naked in my living room, just laboring or whatever. But I just told him, "Hey, I'm having a home birth, so when I go into labor, you're just going to have to find a
Take
place
your
to go."
notes. Yeah.
He was planning on driving to Jersey, sleeping over at my brother's house. I
Yeah.
had the baby in like 4 hours, and he was like,
Maybe
"Oh,
way
I
out.
I just went to get coffee," and I was like, "Cool, you can come back. It's fine."
But I had
But
some of the kids went trick-or-treating and then they came back and they had a sibling.
it was just such
So
a non-issue, and I think it's one of these
yeah,
things that like feels like a really big, well, I can't do this because the home isn't perfect. And I was like, you don't need much.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
agree. I completely agree. You really don't need much. And then that goes transitions well into the mess. It's really not that messy. And I always say we will leave your home as we found it or cleaner, right? If you
Yes.
have dishes in the sink, I'll probably do the dishes, right? Or ask Noelle to do them. Poor Noelle. But no, the mess is really well contained. We have little tricks and methods for how to ensure that the bed is maintained, that your mattress doesn't get affected potentially, that the floor doesn't get affected. If you have like a really white house, like you might want to get 2 bottles of hydrogen peroxide so that we can remove blood in a location. But like the largest spots of blood I've ever had to remove from anything are like little itty bitty quarter-sized things because we're really mindful.
Mhm.
And it's not this massively bloody experience. All right, there's bloody show, and then there's some bleeding when baby gets born. Yes, there's fluid. I've sometimes been very messy after a birth when I get baptized in a very biblical way by a baby with their amniotic fluid. And I'm like, oh, thank you. This is so great for my hair. But no, it's just not messy. And I've also had 2 home births myself, so I really know from a visceral experience.
I love it. I love it. And there's a two bag, just for anybody who doesn't know, there's a two-bag system that the
Yep, you get
midwives
one garbage
use.
bag and one laundry bag. If you
And
get the
it's
really little bags, it might be 2.
right. But it's so easy, and it like feels like it shouldn't be that easy. But the other thing is like there's lots of hands at home births in a really wonderful, the village shows up kind of a way. Like you have the midwife, the assistant, usually a doula, a partner, sometimes your mom pops in if you want her to. And and at the end of the day, you throw out the bag with all the chucks and all the, disposable things. And then the other bag is towels and blankets and other things that have touched any fluids or any baby and whatever, and you just throw that in the wash before you go, and that's it.
You had a water birth, right?
I did.
I want to
Yeah.
speak very quickly to that. I bring the sump pump. You don't have to
Hmm.
empty the tub. Don't worry, Dad. You're not in charge. Nobody's got to siphon out the
Oh,
water and find a place. You don't have to have a garden for us to empty it into. It literally can go straight down the toilet, no problem. And then we throw the liner away. And then
yep.
we break down your tub. We clean your tub and we break it down. No, you don't rent from me, but me and my assistant are going to clean that up. That's part of our care. That's part of the global fee.
That's part of the global fee. I remember my brother, it wasn't messy, and my husband was like, "No. The midwife just left and it looks like nothing happened." That was his answer. It looked like nothing happened. And I just remember thinking that's such a man thing to be worried about. That it's messy, but
It's
it's
also
valid
something you
and
shouldn't
people,
need to worry about in your immediate postpartum. If we're trying to protect that sacred space,
yeah.
having an additional mess is not actually like appropriate to leave you with.
Oh, of course. No, I
So
know.
that's why it's
I
like
think
you
it's
should, the
interesting that
truth
like I'm like
settling in.
here's your
needs.
niece, here's your niece. And I, by the way, I just did that in my living room and it's like, was it messy? But it is, I think, a concern for people because it's
Absolutely.
so foreign. I think home birth, we're so disconnected from it as a community that we used to see it. We used to be in the presence of laboring people, you know, and now it's really, we're just used to everything being behind closed doors. And I think people think it's really like a horror show, and it's actually
And
not.
I
It's
also
really
just
normal.
really want to quickly add to that because transfer is a real part of home birth. If a transfer occurs, I go with my client to the transferring institution, even if I'm taking my private vehicle, right? If they're in theirs or whatever, my assistant will stay behind and she cleans up. Right. So if we had already filled the tub, we've been
Mm,
laboring the tub, she's going to be emptying the tub and putting that away and, making the bed and like, right. So that if the client then births at the hospital and is coming home, they are also coming home to a clean home.
I love that.
Yeah. Because
Michelle,
that's,
this has been like the greatest conversation. I love you so much. You know, I
I
love
love
you
you.
so much. But this was so helpful for anybody who's thinking about home birth because I think we touched on so many things that are obstacles, real or imagined, right? If there's one thing that you could say to somebody who is pregnant right now and thinking about doing the next one at home, what would you say to them?
Ask the important questions to the people that you're interviewing. I strongly recommending interviewing more than one if that's possible in your area, right? Get the vibe, get the energy, ask the important questions that are going to help alleviate any concerns you might have, and then listen to podcasts like this and get a real sense of what home birth looks like so you can decide if it's something for you or not. And then I'll tell you it's really fun.
I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle. If you're on Long Island, go call Michelle, follow her on Instagram, go to her website, get
Then
booked in with
I
her because there's nothing like really good midwifery care for any stage of your health. East End Midwifery. How can people find you? Can you share with us?
Yeah, I'm like the social media worst human. So my office is in Southampton. East End Midwifery Services is my technical name. My website is East End Midwife. And that's the same hashtag or at. That's the at for Instagram and Facebook. And there's some content on there. I mean, you definitely can like see who I am. And yeah, that would be how you'd find me, or word of mouth. You can find me on the different home birth blogs because I exist there.
I love it. And we'll include everything in the show notes so you can reach out to Michelle. Awesome. Thank you so, so much. This was amazing.
That was just amazing. I'm so grateful for Michelle for coming onto our show and sharing her time and her wisdom. I hope that this information has empowered you to have your mind open about home birth, right? This conversation, both parts one and part two, and again, please go listen to part one, all about home birth safety, the training of midwives, what a home to hospital transfer in the middle of labor looks like, and what it looks like in the pregnancy time. These are really important things that we need to talk about in order to release the stigma of home birth, in order to educate and inform ourselves to make the best choice that we can, and also to help us get the people that we love, that we need their buy-in on board. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that partner who's like, yeah, I hear that that's what you want, but I'm just really unsure about it. That home birth safety conversation will help really bring a lot of context and color into the nuances of safety when thinking about giving birth at home. So, when we left off with Michelle, she said that her one piece of advice for people who are thinking about giving birth is actually doing the work of interviewing your home birth midwife. And so, what I want you to do is go into our show notes and look for a free download that I put together for you with all the questions that you need in order to really thoroughly interview your home birth midwife. And like Michelle said, please interview more than one, gather your information, and as you'll see in this free guide, my advice is research, 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 and then follow your gut. And with that, I leave you. Until next time, please subscribe if you like what you're hearing so that every week when the episode is released, it will pop up in your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for listening.